Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time you had a thought, a truly original thought, that wasn't suggested to you by a screen, a trend, a teacher, or someone else's opinion? Take a moment, think seriously. There- Most people, when they sit with that question, realize the answer is they can't remember. And that is not an accident. There is a philosopher named Henry David Thoreau who went to live alone in the woods for 2 years. Not because he was depressed, not because he was running from something. He did it because he looked around at the people in his town, people who worked, ate, slept, worked again. And he wrote one of the most devastating sentences in the history of philosophy. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. He wrote that in 1854. Nothing has changed. If anything, it has gotten worse. Today, we're going to talk about why most people never truly live, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. The autopilot life. Imagine a man named Raj. He is 34 years old. He wakes up at 7 a.m., checks his phone before his eyes fully open, scrolls for 18 minutes, news, memes, someone's vacation, an ad. He doesn't decide to do this. His thumb just moves. He eats breakfast while watching something, gets dressed while listening to something, drives to work while thinking about nothing in particular, sits at a desk, comes home, eats dinner while watching something again, sleeps. Saturday comes. He feels vaguely restless. He calls it relaxing. Now here is the philosophical question. Is Raj living, or is Raj simply processing time? The ancient Greeks had two different words for time. Chronos, the ticking clock, the calendar, the hours that pass whether you are present or not. And kairos, the charged moment. The moment when something real happens, when you are fully awake, when you feel that your life is actually, genuinely yours. Most people live entirely in chronos. They exist in a long queue of hours, moving from one to the next, waiting, though they couldn't tell you what they are waiting for. The philosopher Martin Heidegger called this man, the they-self, the version of you that doesn't think for itself but does what they do, what people do. You get the job people get. You have the opinions people have. You want the things people want. Heidegger said this is not a moral failure. It is the default setting of human beings. But here is the terrifying part. You can live an entire life in that default setting and never notice, because the autopilot is comfortable. It requires nothing from you. Society's programming. Now the autopilot doesn't run itself. Something programs it. From the moment you were born, you were handed a script. Go to school, get good marks, get a stable job, get married, buy a house, have children, retire, die. Nobody sat you down and said, "Here, this is what a successful human life looks like." It was never stated that directly. It didn't need to be. It was in every movie you watched, every conversation at every family dinner, every worried question a relative asked when you deviated from the path. The French philosopher Michel Foucault spent his entire career studying how societies discipline individuals without ever using force. His insight was radical. You don't need a king with a sword to control people. You just need to make them police themselves. When you feel shame about taking an unconventional career path, who put that shame there? When you feel like you are behind in life because you haven't reached certain milestones by a certain age, who wrote that timeline? You did not choose your values in a free and open marketplace of ideas. You inherited them before you had the critical tools to evaluate them. Karl Marx called it ideology. The dominant ideas of any society are always the ideas of the ruling class, presented as if they are universal common sense. You don't question the rules of the game because you've been taught that the game is just reality. And the philosopher Paulo Freire, writing about oppression, said something extraordinary. The most efficient form of oppression is one where the oppressed have internalized the oppressor's values so deeply that they oppress themselves. You don't need external chains when people have built their own, inside their minds. This is not pessimism. This is just an honest description of what happens to almost every human being who grows up inside a culture. The question is, what do you do when you realize it? Comfort addiction. Here is where it gets even more difficult. Even when people sense that they are sleepwalking through their lives, and many do sense it, in quiet moments, in that 3 feeling that something is wrong, most of them reach for a distraction. Because the alternative is discomfort. Blaise Pascal, the 17th century French philosopher, wrote something that reads like it was written about 2024. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Think about that. He is saying that the root of most of our problems, war, greed, cruelty, meaningless ambition, is simply that we cannot be alone with ourselves. Because if you sit alone with yourself long enough, questions begin to rise. Am I happy? Is this the life I want? Do I actually believe the things I say I believe? Those questions are dangerous. They demand answers, and the answers might require change, and change is painful. So instead, we reach for the phone. We turn on the television. We stay very, very busy because busyness is the socially acceptable way to avoid your own existence. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called this aesthetic existence, living purely at the surface, chasing pleasure, novelty, and stimulation. Not because it gives you deep satisfaction, but because the motion itself keeps you from having to stop. Modern neuroscience actually confirms what these thinkers intuited. The brain's reward system is hijacked by novelty. Every notification, every new piece of content releases a small hit of dopamine. You are not scrolling because you are enjoying it. You are scrolling because stopping feels like withdrawal. You have been made addicted to the avoidance of your own depth. And the cruelest part, it works perfectly. Most people go from birth to death having never spent a significant period of time asking, what do I actually want? What do I actually think? Who am I when no one is watching and nothing is entertaining me? The fear of thinking deeply. But there is one more layer, and this one is the deepest. Even when people strip away the distractions, even when they recognize the programming, even when they sit with the discomfort, there is still a fear. A very specific, very quiet fear. The fear of what they might find. Plato wrote the allegory of the cave. Prisoners have been chained in a cave their whole lives, watching shadows on a wall. They believe those shadows are reality. One prisoner escapes and sees sunlight for the first time. He is blinded. It hurts. He wants to go back. Then he adjusts. He sees the real world. He is transformed. He returns to the cave to free the others, and they try to kill him. Plato's point is not just about enlightenment. It is about the cost of thinking deeply. The man who goes back into the cave can no longer enjoy the shadows. He has lost something, the comfortable illusion. He has gained something far greater, but the exchange is painful and it is permanent. This is why most people intuitively avoid deep thinking. It is not stupidity. It is self-preservation. If you truly examine your career, you might discover you have wasted 10 years on someone else's dream. If you truly examine your relationships, you might discover you have been choosing comfort over genuine connection. If you truly examine your beliefs, you might discover you don't actually know why you believe most of what you believe. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, the act of lying to yourself in order to avoid the terrifying freedom that comes with full self-awareness. We pretend we have no choice. We pretend circumstances forced us. Because genuine freedom is terrifying. It means you are responsible, fully, completely, for everything. Most people would rather be a passenger in their own life than face that weight. How to actually apply this? So, what do you do with all of this? I am not going to tell you to quit your job, sell everything, and move to the mountains. Philosophy that demands you blow up your life before it offers you anything useful is useless philosophy. Here are 4 concrete practices drawn directly from these thinkers. First, practice chosen discomfort. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, prescribed voluntary hardship, not because suffering is good, but because it proves to you that you are choosing your comforts rather than being enslaved by them. Once a week, sit alone for 30 minutes with no phone, no music, nothing. Just your thoughts. Notice what comes up. Notice what you avoid. Second, audit your inherited values. Take one belief you hold confidently about success, relationships, politics, religion, and ask, where did this come from? Did I choose this or was it given to me? Would I choose it again today if I were starting from nothing? You do not have to abandon the belief, but you must own it consciously or stop calling it yours. Third, practice what Socrates called the examined life. He said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." That does not mean you need to be a philosopher. It means asking, regularly, am I living in accordance with what I actually value, or am I performing a version of life that I think others expect from me? Fourth, choose kairos over chronos. Deliberately create moments of full presence. A real conversation where you put the phone away. A walk where you notice the world around you. A decision you make slowly and consciously instead of by default. You cannot live every moment at full intensity, but you can interrupt the autopilot deliberately, regularly. The philosopher Albert Camus once wrote that the only truly serious philosophical question is whether or not life is worth living. I want to modify that slightly. The only truly serious question is not whether life is worth living. It is whether you are actually living it. The autopilot will always be there. Society will always have a script for you. Comfort will always offer itself as an alternative to depth, and the shadows in the cave will always be easier to watch than the sun. But you are watching this video. You ask the question, and Socrates believed that the moment you sincerely ask the question, who am I? How should I live? What is this all for? You have already taken the first step out of the cave. The examined life begins not with answers. It begins with the courage to ask. I'll see you in the next one.